Harry, America, bonjour, hi, Canada, and our grieving is with you to our friends in the north. In total, 83 Iranians, 63 Canadians were on board the Kiev-bound Ukraine flight, International PS-752. There were also 9 crew members and 11 additional victims from Ukraine, 4 Afghans, 4 Britons, 3 Germans. Iran shot down a civilian airliner. You may not get that total, unvarnished message by the Trump derangement syndrome suffering left-wingers in the media and the Democratic Party, but Iran shot down a civilian airliner when they fired 3 dozen rockets at the American base. For a time, I thought they wanted war with America during those 3 hours when all I knew was that they had fired a barrage of rockets at Iran. I thought, we are going to war, and it had better be quick, and we had better use massive retaliation. Turns out they were aiming and had leaked it and decided not to escalate. They'd wanted a face-saving measure. Well, in their incredible incompetence, the Soleimani-less Iranians managed to shoot down a civilian airliner, just like the Russians did a few years ago. Barbarism, just barbarism. The regime. And to the 82 innocent Iranians, our prayers and grieving. To the 63 Canadians, our mourning. To the Germans and the Brits and the Ukrainians, our mourning prayers. It's a very, very sad day. What's really astonishing is that some American politicians, some, not many, some, have suggested this is Donald Trump's fault, which is incredibly evident that Trump derangement syndrome has reached end stage. When you start blaming Donald Trump for Iran shooting down a civilian airliner when Iran was not under attack, where we did not enter their airspace, where we closed the airspace to civilian traffic ourselves, you know you are not analyzing the situation correctly. Let's go immediately to Donald Trump last night in Toledo. The rally that he gave. There is a great Wall Street Journal article, which I've linked at Twitter, about the extraordinary national security team he has assembled and how they acted with unity and dispatch to deter Iran, to take out Soleimani, to prevent attacks on Americans that would have been murderous. Great piece. But Donald Trump is the story. He went to Toledo last night. Here is what he had to say, cut number 40.
For years, the sadistic mass murderer Qasem Soleimani planned and executed attacks against American targets, killing and wounding thousands of U.S. service members and many, many thousands and even hundreds of thousands of other people. As the leader of Iran's terrorist Quds Force, Soleimani spread death, destruction, and mayhem across the Middle East and far beyond. He ordered the violent assault on the American embassy in Baghdad, and you saw this was the anti-Benghazi. We got there very quickly. This is the exact opposite. We did it exactly the opposite of Benghazi, where they got there so late. All they saw when they got there days later were burning embers from days before. All they saw. We got there very early. We saw what was happening. I saw what was happening. I said, what's that all about? And that was going to be another Benghazi. Had they broken through the final panels of glass, they were breaking it. Had they gotten through, we would have had either hundreds of dead people or hundreds of hostages. That wasn't going to happen. And I called up our great generals. I said, get them over there now. And one of our leaders, one of our really admired people, said, sir, we'll have them there tomorrow. I said, nope, get in the planes right now, have them there immediately. And they got there immediately. Fortunately. But he directed the recent rocket strikes that wounded 4 American service members, badly wounded. and killed an American citizen. That was just before we happened to hit him. Soleimani was actively planning new attacks, and he was looking very seriously at our embassies, and not just the embassy in Baghdad. But we stopped him, and we stopped him quickly, and we stopped him cold. So in my direction, the United States military eliminated Qasem Soleimani and ended his rampage through not only that part of the world, but much bigger parts of the world. He was all over. He was a bad guy. He was a bloodthirsty terror, and he's no longer a terror. He's dead.
He is dead. Let's play one more cut of Donald Trump. Well, let me play the short ones. Here's Donald Trump talking about what happens if you threaten citizens of the United States. Cut number 42.
We have this tremendous military, and you know what that is? That's really a great fighting force, but I hope we never have to use it. I really do. You saw an example. You saw an example of that a couple of days ago. So we seek friends, not enemies, but if you dare to threaten our citizens, you do so at your own grave peril.
There is an article in the Wall Street Journal. Trump's new national security team made fast work of Iran strike. White House advisors were cohesive, less inclined than their predecessors to push back against the president's wishes. I think that is absurd, but that's a headline maker. I'm looking at the president, flanked on the right by the vice president, Secretary of State Pompeo, Mick Mulvaney. On his left by DOD Secretary Esper, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Milley, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien. That's it. That's the core team. The story begins. Michael Bender, Michael Gordon, Gordon Lubald, and Warren Strobel. President Trump and his senior national security advisors waited anxiously in the White House Situation Room Tuesday night after intelligence warning that Iranian missiles would hit two bases that the U.S. military uses. When it was clear that Iran had inflicted no casualties, there was relief, according to administration officials. At a press conference the following morning, the president spoke of new sanctions on Iran, but no new military strike, moving the two longtime antagonists for the moment back from the brink of war. Days earlier, the U.S. had killed the leader of the foreign wing of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The speed at which events unfolded showed the influence of the new team of senior national security and military advisors surrounding the president. The group, including Secretary of Defense Mark Esper, new Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Mark Milley, new National Security Advisor to the President Robert O'Brien, along with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, backed the president's decision to kill the top Iranian military commander and move swiftly to carry it out. The new team was cohesive, less inclined than its predecessors to push back. I do not believe that's true. I think they will. This was not a case where pushback was needed. It was a case where dispatch was called for. And they will be less likely to consult in advance with others in the administration. You betcha. They're not going to let it leak. They're not going to talk to Democrats who are going to blare it out to MSNBC or CNN. The targeted killing of Major General Qasem Soleimani is the most decisive military action of Mr. Trump's first term, and he removes a longtime enemy of the United States. You know, O'Brien, the new national security advisor, Pompeo, to a lesser extent, the vice president, they're all friends of mine. Pompeo's been on the show 100 times. I've known O'Brien. He was my law partner and my dear friend. I mean, I got a lot of people in that team. I know a lot of people at the NSC. I know a lot of people at DOD. And they are decisive. They are coherent around the president's vision of peace through strength. And do not hurt Americans. Do not wound, do not kill, do not threaten Americans. We're not real high on you doing that to our allies either. But the one thing that binds this team together is that they all entered office, those who've been there for 3 years, like Mike Pompeo, and Mark Esper almost, but he was at Secretary of Army, originally Secretary Mnuchin, Mick Mulvaney at OMB, and now is acting Chief of Staff, and Robert O'Brien's been around for almost 3 years. He was the hostage negotiator, but that wasn't involved in the core national security team. He's only been doing that since September. They've all believed in the same thing. Reagan doctrine of peace through strength. Do not kill, wound, or threaten Americans. Do not kill, wound, threaten Americans. Democrats, on the other hand, are blaming Americans for Iran's shoot-down of a civilian airliner. That's the Democratic Party. I'll take Trump and his team. I think the country will as well in November. Coming right back after the break with more Trump in Toledo. You're listening to The Hugh Hewitt Show.